You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Hello, Colts fans, and welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. My name is Joe Hopkins. Joining me is Mike Chappell via the power of the internet. Dave Griffiths is out covering the NCAA tournament. Ever heard of it? So he will not be able to join us today. We got a lot to talk about. The NFL is in the midst of a free agent frenzy. There was a huge trade that happened late last week that completely shakes up the top of the NFL draft. But before we dive into it, Mike, of course, how are you doing today?
Alive and well in Beech Grove, so trying to keep, on top of what all's going on. The Colts, these first few days, as usual, is very busy. And the Colts have been more busy than I think we thought they would be.
At least us. I know there's some people on Twitter pulling their hair out right now, but this was to be expected if you've been paying attention to what Chris Ballard has been doing.
They've had about 10 player moves. I mean, come on.
Exactly. You got a few notifications on your phone there. Let's go ahead and start with the trade. The Bears send the number 1 overall pick to Frank Reich's Carolina Panthers. Panthers obviously searching for their franchise quarterback, and to get that pick, they sent Chicago a lot. The Bears receive star receiver DJ Moore, the Panthers' 9th overall pick in this draft, pick number 61 overall in this draft, a 2024 first rounder, and a 2025 second rounder. So the Panthers jump literally everybody, but also the Indianapolis Colts, as they now have their pick of the quarterbacks in this draft. Obviously, Houston sits at number 2, and they're in the market for a quarterback as well. Very likely that they'll select one. Mike, at best, the Colts now are looking at the 3rd quarterback in this draft. What are your thoughts on the trade? First of all, could the Colts have even competed with this offer?
Well, the easy answer is no, and that's because Carolina was coming up from 9. So whatever they were going to give to move up that far was just going to – there's no way – I shouldn't say no, there's no way. Very unlikely the Colts would have put something together to compete. I'm a little surprised Carolina or the Bears decided to slide back to 9. That's a long way to go. Now maybe they try to go back up a few spots, but it just would have been hard for the Colts to compete with that kind of package again, because the Panthers had to come up a long way. And from what I heard, just from looking at all the reports, DJ Moore was a major part of this deal. Well, would the Colts have given up Michael Pittman? I don't know. My guess is no. But it's
Even
just
if
hard.
they did, DJ Moore is better than Michael Pittman.
Agreed. So, but again, the fact that Carolina came so far, it would have been hard for the Colts to come up with something comparable, only moving up 3 spots.
Yeah. I look at this and I say it's very unlikely the Colts would have been able to compete because they don't have a DJ Moore to offer. I'm surprised Carolina did offer DJ Moore. I don't know who their young quarterback is going to be throwing to now. That's a huge piece to ship away as you try and revamp your offense with the quarterback. But I think that's really what moved the needles for the Bears to go ahead and say, okay, let's do this now in March, even though we could have drawn this out until draft day if they wanted to. But the opportunity to get a star wide receiver like DJ Moore, who's still young, pair him with your young quarterback. I mean, DJ's probably worth a first-rounder himself. So really, value-wise, they got 3 first-round picks if you consider DJ Moore worth a first-round pick, and 2 second-rounders there. Let's talk about how this impacts the Colts. Like I said, they're looking at best, the 3rd quarterback off the board. Obviously, we don't know how their careers are going to turn out, so I don't want to say the 3rd best quarterback. We've seen many drafts where the 3rd or 4th quarterback drafted ended up having the best career of everyone in his draft class. But now you look at that Arizona spot right ahead of the Colts, number 3, and any other team in the market for a quarterback in this draft has to be targeting that Arizona draft pick to try and jump the Colts or jump whoever else wants to get into the market there. Do you think the Colts have to find a way to make a deal with Arizona to ensure themselves their third quarterback?
Again, this is all. It all hinges on how does Chris Ballard and the Colts value these quarterbacks. You know, if you think they're all sort of on the same level, then you stay at 4 and you take whatever's there. You know, and now you're not going to get the top 2 quarterbacks, even though, again, will the Colts have whoever goes 1 and 2, will they have those guys ranked as their top 2 quarterbacks? So, but the safest thing, obviously, is to trade with Arizona, and then you're back in control of that pick of the third quarterback, however you have him ranked. I keep going back to that because that's all that matters. Now, again, I've already heard things now that, you know, Frank Reich is really enthralled with Anthony Richardson. I just can't. I can't believe that. I can't believe that somebody will use the first overall pick on a quarterback who's just an athletic freak. But what's he started? 12 games? Is that, if I have it right? So I don't know. And again, as far as what Arizona's going to want, moving up from 4 to 3 won't take a ton. It just shouldn't. I've not looked at the trade chart, what it would take and all that. But if somebody comes from further down, they're going to offer Arizona more. So that's where the Colts are. They may be at 4. Remember when we talked to Chris Ballard at the Combine, he says, hey, everybody's already got us moving up and this, that, and the other, but who's to say we don't stay at 4 and get our guys? So we'll see. But the safest thing is to move up to 3, but it won't be in a vacuum, and other teams might want that third pick.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts when this trade was made and continue to work through it in my mind. As I've stated on this podcast, I'm not a huge fan of Will Levis, and I'm not a scout. I could totally be wrong. He might end up being the best quarterback in this draft, but I certainly have diagnosed myself with Carson Wentz PTSD, and Levis reminds me of Carson Wentz quite a bit. And who knows how they're going to go? I mean, maybe the Panthers take Will Levis, and Frank Reich falls in love with his new Carson Wentz. We have no idea. I think a lot of people just assume Stroud and Young are going to be the first 2 quarterbacks off the board. I think a lot of people have Richardson as the next guy after that. But NFL teams show every draft season that their rankings are all that matters when they're on the board and when they're drafting. So I've been just trying to talk myself into Will Levis a little bit. If the Colts do just sit at 4 and someone jumps ahead of them for, whoever that next pick is, I've been thinking a lot more about Hendon Hooker, who, if it wasn't for the ACL he tore, I believe in November, would be regarded, as one of these top quarterbacks. It wouldn't be a top 4. It would be a top 5, I believe, if Hendon Hooker didn't tear his ACL. How much does that play into the evaluation? Could Chris Ballard shock us all and take stud defensive end Will Anderson at 4 and then trade back up into the end of the first round for a Hendon Hooker? I think that's a possibility. And when I think that, the more I think of that versus just sticking at 4 and taking Will Levis, the more I kind of warm up to it. There's a lot of options still on the board here. And then there's also the possibility that we're overvaluing these quarterbacks. Around this time last year, everyone just assumed that Malik Willis was going to be a first-round pick up there with Kenny Pickett last year. Willis ends up going in the 3rd round. I think Pickett was the only quarterback taken in the 1st round, and I'm not even sure there was any quarterback taken in the 2nd round last year. So there's a lot of speculation going on right now, a lot of fluid movement, but it certainly was a huge shakeup to see Carolina go from 9 to 1 as they secure their chance to draft the quarterback of their choosing.
You know what's crazy, and you mentioned it, and it wouldn't be that crazy for, again, I don't think there's any question that everyone always overvalues quarterbacks in the draft. They just do. Sam Darnold, the Jets have done that. They've reached twice in the last, 5 years, is it? And that's why they're loading up and are getting Aaron Rodgers. But it would be so in character for Ballard to stay at 4 and draft the best player in the draft, whoever it is, because it's not one of the quarterbacks. The top player, I don't know, 3 or 4 aren't quarterbacks. So you can get that pass rusher, you can get a left tackle, and then, like you said, then get the Tennessee kid. I don't know if I'd wait until the second round. I would want to move up. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to be bold and move up to get him.
Yeah, move back into the first, get yourself that 5th-year option and all that.
And the fan base would probably revolt, but value-wise, that probably makes the most sense to do. Maybe what would make more sense is to trade back from 4 to like 6 or 7. And I've not looked at the draft board to see who they'd trade with, and pick up a few more picks and still get a really good player. But if they do that, if they go that route, which again, I'd say, yeah, okay, I can see that. But then what is your plan B at quarterback? And Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton's already re-signed. What did he go to, Carolina?
Yeah,
I think it was. Marcus Mariota. What? And then you're aiming, if not, you expect for Hooker, but then maybe you're in position next year to get a really good quarterback. I don't know. But you're going to have to really do some splaining about what you're doing at quarterback, because the fan base is, and the owner, everybody is sick and tired of spinning their wheels and even going backwards, regressing at quarterback. And if they don't take a quarterback at 4 or move up to 3 to get one, it's clear that next year is going to be more than a developmental year. It's going to be another 4-12-1 type season, because you're not going to have the talent at quarterback to get you to the playoffs. It'll be hard to imagine that. So I saw a conversation with Stephen Holder, and he's spot on. I think he and Kevin Bowen talked about it, is what are these guys doing? And I agree that they've not done a very good job of explaining what the plan is. Are they in serious reboot mode to where they're going to take a step back next year, which seems kind of scary considering what they went through last year? Or are they trying to stay relevant while they do this rebuild, not a reboot? So it's really a difficult situation. And from talking to the owner over the last year, he wants to draft his own and develop his own. He is tired of the recycled quarterbacks. And if you go with the Tennessee kid back of the first round, second round, it increases the importance of bringing in a veteran who can keep your head above water. So this is major. And again, the owner has already shown his trust in Chris Ballard by bringing him back. He didn't blow it up. He brought Chris Ballard back and said, fix this, get us back to where we need to go. But there still has to be a sense of urgency on how much patience will there be. I always thought that bringing him back and going with a young quarterback meant at least 2 years for the GM, at least 3 stretching it to me if you're not showing super progress. So this is fascinating. We may have talked about last week, Lamar Jackson. I just can't see that happening because of the,
I don't believe he's actually even available.
I don't disagree. I think, again, one of the reasons that teams don't like to deal with tenders or franchise tags is you're generally negotiating a contract for the original team. So it's hard for me to believe that Baltimore finally has their guy and they're going to let him go, even for two first-round draft picks. Because if you haven't got a quarterback, you can't compete, as the Colts have found out. They can't compete at a necessary level. So this is fascinating. And the bottom line is what the trade, the Bears-Panthers trade, what that did, it just eliminated a major option for the Colts to move up to 1. And again, from talking to Chris Ballard, and I believe him, he would have moved up for the guy if he was convinced that guy was the next guy for the next 8 to 10 years. He wasn't going to do it out of desperation, even though they're in a desperate mode. So this next 6 weeks is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it will be. And I understand when I look at the Carolina trade why the Colts couldn't necessarily compete with that. But it kind of brings me flashbacks of the Matthew Stafford trade when we said, the Colts couldn't compete with that. And then if someone jumps ahead of them for the number 3 pick, and then all of a sudden 2 teams jumped ahead of you for a quarterback, at a certain point, it's shame on you for not doing what you have to do to secure a quarterback. And you can't think of it as in, well, we're just trading up one spot. The spot is irrelevant. You're trading up for a specific quarterback, as is the other team. So just going, why would we give up all that to go from the 4th pick to the 3rd pick? It doesn't matter what the pick is. It matters which quarterback you get, and that's going to impact your franchise for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So it's fascinating as we go through this and put our GM caps on and wonder what Chris Ballard and company are thinking up there, how they're ranking the quarterbacks. Could they take someone else at 4 and then maybe go after a Hendon Hooker or trade down? And, if they like Hooker better than Levis, I don't want to say who cares about the ACL, but that's not a career-ending injury by any means. I saw reports he's supposed to be ready around the start of the season. Most rookie quarterbacks sit a few games anyway. If you thought he was better than Levis before the ACL, you should probably still consider him better after the ACL and take him in the first round to get that extra contract year. So it's just another thing to think about. I don't think Chris Ballard and the Colts are boxing themselves into the first 4 quarterbacks in the draft. They're going to explore all options, and I saw a report that they have a top 30 visit with Hendon Hooker, and I'm sure they'll visit with all the quarterbacks in this draft, but that's certainly a possibility.
That's what drives this all, and I'll continue to say it, is whatever they do or don't do will tell us volumes about how they value these quarterbacks. It's one thing for all the draft analysts who they work their ass off, whether it's Kuiper or Todd McShay or Daniel Jeremiah, they do their work, and they really do. So I do trust that. But how does Chris Ballard and his people and Shane Steichen look at these guys, and whatever they do or don't do is going to tell us that they either agreed that there are 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5 with Hooker, maybe that, but not with a top 4 or 5 pick. But if they sit still, it's going to tell me that they maybe thought there were 2 quarterbacks worthy, and there was a big drop-off after 1 and 2.
What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with the Mayo Clinic specialist to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means together we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. Need new windows? Contact your hometown team today. Hometown Window and Doors are Central Indiana's premier, locally owned, full-service Anderson window dealer with master installers. From design to installation, the Hometown team handles it all. They carry unlimited options with competitive pricing. Call them direct to get 25% off your windows if you call within the next 60 days. Hometown Windows and Doors gives you all the perks of a national brand with that hometown feel. Visit them at hometownwindowteam.com today. All right, Mike, it's time to dive into free agency, trades. We got all kinds of deals going on. We moved the timing of this podcast so that we could be recording when the 4 p.m. new league year hits to see if there's any last-second cuts or deals that the Colts may decide to make. Let's go ahead and start with a big trade. They ship off star cornerback Stephon Gilmore to the Dallas Cowboys for a 5th-round pick. This move clears nearly $10 million in cap space, and the more you look at it, the more it makes sense considering Gilmore, while still playing at a very high level, he'll be 33 in September. He had just 1 year left on his contract, no longer fits within the Colts' timeline of when they expect to be an actual contender. So Gilmore gets to go to a team that does have actual realistic Super Bowl hopes, and the Colts get $10 million in cap space to either sign some of their own to extensions, add some other players to their roster. What were your thoughts when you saw this trade come down the pike?
I guess good for Gilly, and it's really he was the best corner they've had since Vontae Davis had that Pro Bowl year. He won them, had a big hand in winning 2 or 3 games, 3 I think it was anyway.
Especially the Denver game,
right? And just a solid player, and he's one of those guys that I'm guessing in November was thinking, what the heck did I get myself into? Because he was coming to a team that a lot of us thought, again, would at least contend for the division. Didn't happen. Good for him. Again, they get a 5th-round pick for a guy that was going to be a free agent. And like you said, that barring the unforeseen, they won't compete for the division next year. So it gives them some flexibility. So I think it's a win-win for both the Colts and for Gilmore.
Also yesterday, a report dropped that the Colts are expected to release quarterback Matt Ryan. I saw this and said, well, duh.
We've been talking about that for a month.
Yeah, at least a month, probably since November. We've been talking about that. But we'll say it again, the move would clear $17 million in cap space. The Colts would pay Ryan $35 million if he stayed on the roster. He might not be the only one. Other potential cap casualties include cornerback Kenny Moore, center Ryan Kelly, and tight end Mo Alley Cox. We'll keep an eye on Twitter to see if any news breaks as we approach that 4 p.m. deadline there. The Colts certainly hitting a bit of a reset button. I would expect most of these moves to happen on the defensive side. This is why just last week, my guy was talking about that cornerback position. Going to be a position in need. All of a sudden, Gilmore's gone. Kenny Moore, I would expect to be gone. Another cornerback, Brandon Faison, is gone. He signed back with the Raiders after a maybe below average, I'd call it, season with the Colts. Had a few starts with them. Another linebacker, Bobby Okereke, signed with the New York Giants on a pretty good deal. 4 years, $40 million, 22 guaranteed. He had 151 total tackles in 2022, which ranked 10th in the NFL. Okereke, or is it okay? I can never remember. Okay, yes. Thank you for correcting me. Whichever one I say is usually the wrong one. But he was a player who a lot of people liked, but with all the money they have sunk into Shaq Leonard, with how Franklin played as a starter last year, he was the guy who all of a sudden became a bit expendable.
So, sort of like Anthony Walker a few years ago.
Yeah, didn't get the deal. Got a much better deal than Walker.
No question. But, probably more of a complete linebacker, better in coverage. But it's just, I remember back in the day when the Colts were really, really hitting on linebackers, Mike Peterson and Marcus Washington and David Thornton. And it's when you draft really good players, but then when it comes time to re-sign them, they want, above market what you think they're worth. So good for them. That's what you want. And we haven't gotten there yet, but then and a lot of this has fallen into place. Neither one of us expected Okereke to be back, but we expected EJ Speed to be back, and he is. So that's kind of played out the way we anticipated.
2-year deal for EJ Speed worth up to $8 million. So a nice pay increase for him, as well as much more affordable price when comparing to Bobby there. And Speed played well when he had his opportunities. 2022, a 78.4 Pro Football Focus grade. Played all 17 games in last season, had 5 starts. Career high in tackles was 63. So I feel fine about this linebacker group going into next season, even if it is led by Franklin and Speed and, Shaq. If the worst happens and he's not able to get back out there, I feel fine about Franklin and Speed, considering most of the time there's only 2 linebackers on the field anyway, and you have 3 cornerbacks. Not feeling so confident about the cornerbacks right now, but that's a discussion for another show. And then I assume they'll probably draft some linebackers late in this draft anyway. I believe Franklin was a 7th-round pick. Speed was a 5th-round pick. So they've been getting good production out of late-round linebackers.
But they need Shaq to be back. I mean, for this group to be what it needs to be, Shaq needs to be back and be the player he was. If that's the case, I'm fine with the linebackers. If not, then all of a sudden you're asking, now Zaire showed that he's quality and he can do it, but then you're asking E.J. Speed to really, really change what his role has been. But that's what you hope these guys do. But you need the impact players, the star players, which what Shaq is. I asked Chris Ballard at the Combine about Shaq, and because he's roughly the same time out from the last surgery, about 3.5, 4 months, I think it is, that he was from the first surgery last June when he came back and practiced and played. So they've got to know. They've got to have a really, really good idea that, boy, he's back. That there's every reason to believe he'll be back, or here we are again and we don't know. And if they're sitting here today and they don't know about Shaq, that's a problem. That's a problem. But, again, good for E.J. Speed. It's really kind of crazy. These 2 late-round linebackers, Shaq and Zaire, or not Shaq, but E.J. and Zaire, get second contracts. Now, they're not massive over the top, but to get a second contract, late-round pick, is kudos to them for doing the special teams work and then working your way into the defense.
Yeah, another defender here coming back off of an injury and hopefully will be able to make an impact for the Colts in 2023. Tyquan Lewis re-signs with the team. Second offseason in a row, he signed a 1-year deal to stay in Indianapolis. He's finished the last 2 seasons on IR with a torn patellar tendon, but when he's healthy, he's a quality rotational defensive end. So it was, only a $2 million deal for Lewis, so it doesn't cost the team too much to bring him back, and he gets to stay in Indianapolis where he's been able to have an impact so long as his knees hold up. Some more players the Colts have brought back. Talk about, Doolin, undrafted player. He gets a second contract from the Colts, 2 years, worth up to $9 million. Had career highs last year with 15 catches for 200 yards, and he's also a special team standout, so can help the Colts in 2 ways there. His Pro Football Focus grade last season, 71.6, so really a solid player who we've seen at times can stretch the field, and I feel fine with him being a number 4 wide receiver.
Yeah, that's you're right. I would not think this impacts the need at the position at all. You still need a 3, whether it's bringing back Paris Campbell, whether it's finding a veteran in a very, very thin market. And I wouldn't be real keen if they stay at 4, drafting another receiver in the second round. Then you're having Michael Pittman and then a couple of really young guys at 2 and 3. So, I think Doolin's a great, versatile player that can do a lot of things. But I just can't say, well, we're better off at receiver because we got Ashton back. You still need more there.
Still need more there. We'll see. I saw the Colts are one of the teams with interest in Adam Thielen, who, he not as fast as he once was, but I think would be a great addition. He can play the slot and kind of be that veteran of the group, which is needed in Indianapolis with, as you mentioned, the youth at the position.
He also didn't visit with Frank in Carolina as well.
He's meeting with a few teams. I'm sure Frank Wright would love to poach Thielen away from the Colts. But another re-signing here. Of course, they prioritized bringing back Carter O'Donnell, the undrafted offensive lineman from 2020 who's been with the team but has never played in an NFL game. So I assume he'll be either at the bottom of the roster or on the practice squad, but they like him, so they keep him around. They have brought in some exterior talent. The first signing that made a splash was kicker Matt Gay. 4 years, $22.5 million. His yearly average of $5.6 million ranks second all-time among kickers. Only Baltimore's Justin Tucker makes more on a per-year basis with $6 million. So they're paying Gay a lot, but if he kicks like he did with the Rams, he's going to be worth it. The 28-year-old has been one of the NFL's best kickers over the past 3 years, 92.5% on field goals during that time, and he's missed just 2 of 99 PATs. Over his career, his 87.8 field goal percentage is 5th best in NFL history, and he's also 17 of 23 from 50+. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter complaining about giving a kicker that much money. $5 million a year is not going to set you back from a salary cap standpoint, and now Chris Ballard finally, I think, is exhaling, saying, I don't have to worry about kicker being an issue anymore.
Yeah, the initial reaction was, "Are you crazy? You're now you've got like the second highest paid kicker ever behind Justin Tucker, and so what? We all thought it's crazy. We all thought, I think almost universally, that the one free agent they had to bring back was Chase McLaughlin because of how well he played. Okay, if that was your stance, how can you be upset with bringing in a better kicker than Chase? And that's not to disrespect Chase. He did everything they asked him to do and more last year. And this is not like overpaying a guard and giving him $15 million or a defensive end and giving him 15 or 18, whatever else. It's a kicker. And it's roughly $5 million, $5.5 million a year, whatever it is. But for the next 4 years, barring injury, you don't worry about it. And how many games has this team lost because of kicking over the last 4 or 5 years? Too many. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I really am. Now, if that had been the only major free agent signing, okay, then go crazy. But this was just one of the things. And again, the fact that it's $5 million in roster building terms, that's not going to keep you from doing anything else. So, and again, over the last 4 years, they've had this instability. As much as it has been at quarterback, it's been at kicker as well. So this takes care of it. It reminds me very much of the Colts, Bill Polian signing Adam Vinatieri in 2006, which at the time he signed one of the biggest contracts for a kicker, because then it's taken care of. Now, the teams are vastly different. Back then, that was obviously a Super Bowl team. This team is not. But anyone who complains about this just doesn't like kickers.
Yeah, I mean, I think $5 million, $5.5 million, whatever, a year for a guy who's making 90% of his kicks, I'll take that all day. That's easy. $5 million a year is not something you really even have to plan for. Most teams have more than $5 million a year in dead cap, let alone tied up in a player who's actually being productive and is impacting points almost every time he's on the field for you. So Matt Gay makes the Colts better. Another guy who hopefully will make the Colts better, defensive end Samson Ebukam, I believe is how you say his name. Have you memorized how to spell it yet, Mike? Or
yes, Ebu Cam. So I'll be in good shape.
Great. He gets a 3-year deal worth up to $27 million, about $11 million guaranteed. Ebukam will turn 28 in March. He had a career high 5 sacks last year for the 49ers in a rotational role, 13 quarterback hits, and that was on just 59% of snaps. The previous 3 seasons, he had exactly 4.5 sacks. Per Sports Info Solutions, Ebukam had 47 quarterback pressures last year on 340 pass rush snaps. For comparison, Yannick Ngakoue had 41 on 406 pass rush snaps. Ebukam's PFF grade was 69 last year. Mike, we were talking about the Colts and the need to add a rotational pass rusher. They did just that by getting Ebukam from the 49ers.
Probably an upgrade maybe over Ngakoue. I mean, he's a little bit younger. And we've talked, and this is, again, I don't mean to pile on Ngakoue, but I'm not sure I can remember a team leading 9.5 sacks having less impact. I just thought there were too many times that he wasn't a factor. It still amazes me that the team had, 32 or 33 sacks, which is the second most in franchise history, because it just didn't feel that. So I think they look at adding this guy with Kwity Paye and Dio and Taekwon Lewis is going to be a pretty good group. I don't know if any one of these guys projects as being the 10 to 12 sack guy. I don't know, but I like the move. And I was kind of looking. I can't find my stats right now, but maybe this is like the Danico Autry signing several years ago, which might be one of the Ballard's best free agent signings. Jabal Sherrod and Danico, but I think it's a good pickup.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it as well. I've seen several of the indie media come out on Twitter and say it reminds them of the Danico signing, where he was a good rotational player for the Raiders and then came to the Colts and really became a quality starter. Went on to get an even bigger contract from the Titans. Hopefully, Ibukum can follow in a similar role. And I think, him and Dio Odangbo will kind of share time initially. They can always slide Odangbo inside to pass rush next to Buckner on obvious passing downs. I think Paye, providing he stays healthy, will kind of be that every down defensive end and probably has the best chance of getting you that 10 to 12 sacks. He was certainly really, really good last year when he was on the field. It was just injuries limited his time. So a little bit of pass rush help for the Colts. And that's all they've done so far. I've not seen any news break as we approach 4 p.m., sitting here at 3:55 right now. So we'll keep an eye on that. But there's been plenty of movement across the NFL. Some names that we discussed in the preview show no longer available.
Here's one that just came across. Browns defensive tackle Taven Bryan reaches a 1-year agreement, 1 year, $4.5 million with the Colts. So they added more defensive line help.
Okay, Taven Bryan, I believe, if I'm not wrong, was a former first-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars, coming out of Florida. So a former first-round pick, a guy with a lot of talent, and hopefully someone who, if Buckner misses time or even just to spell Buckner, can provide some athleticism on the interior of that defensive line. So Taven Bryan coming in, I see it here too, $4.5 million. Not sure how much of that is guaranteed. 1-year deal. So there it is, Mike. There is the blockbuster news we've been waiting for all day. No, it's a fine signing. They're continuing to add to that front, as Chris Ballard is always talking about. He says he wants to be 8 or 9 deep, and I think he's trying to make sure of it this year.
Need new windows? Let the Hometown team help. Hometown Windows and Doors is Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer with master installers. From design to installation, we handle it all, carrying nationally known brands like Anderson with more options and competitive pricing. Call us direct and get 25% off your windows if you buy within the next 60 days.
Please contact your Hometown team today. We are Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer.
National brand, hometown feel.
The story of Hancock Health is all about you and everything you need to live your healthiest life. Like Hancock Regional, one of the nation's safest hospitals, and an independent health network with over 70 doctors at more than 30 locations around East Central Indiana. We're growing and evolving to help further your story. And we're just getting started. See all the ways Hancock Health and you can work together to make health possible at hancockhealth.org.
Mike, are you surprised the Colts haven't done more to address the offensive line thus far?
Thus far, again, they're just notorious for bargain shopping. They just are. They're not going to overpay. There have been some times that they thought about overpaying, they didn't, and it proved to be the right thing. I think they need to come out of free agency with a starting right guard. I just
Agreed.
do. And again, a receiver that has done it, that you can rely on. So those are the two areas. Because getting Ekuban and for your pass rush and in the kicker, the two areas again. But like you said, they need corners. They're really short on corners with experience. So, but they're not done yet. We're 2.5 days into free agency, so we'll see where this thing winds up.
Yeah, some names off the board specifically. A lot of the big name guards are gone. Ben Powers from Baltimore signed a big deal with Denver, $52 million over 4 years if he reaches the max of that contract. Nick Davis from Tennessee goes to Chicago. Connor McGovern goes to Buffalo. Will Hernandez goes to or stays with, that is, the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, there's the guard we're all talking about from the Eagles, Isaac Sumalo. He's still available. He's still out there, widely considered the top guard in this class. So we'll see what kind of deal he gets. But considering what Ben Powers got, he might be too expensive for the Indianapolis Colts. I'm sure they're not going to want to sink a ton of money into that guard position. Bridge quarterback is another position that's going to be important for the Colts, and a lot of names have flown off the board there as well. The top one, Jimmy Garoppolo, goes to the Raiders, 3 years, $67 million, 34 of that guaranteed. I'm not sure how that impacts the Raiders' draft plans. They very well might still draft a quarterback and just let Jimmy G start for a year or two until that quarterback is ready. Taylor Heineke goes to the Falcons. Baker Mayfield to the Buccaneers. Andy Dalton, as you mentioned, to Carolina. Sam Darnold to San Francisco. Mike White to Miami. But there's a few names still out there. Minshew from Philadelphia makes a lot of sense, given his time spent with Shane Steichen. Teddy Bridgewater is still out there. Marcus Mariota is still out there. So the Colts have options at quarterback still.
One thing on that, my preference is to go ahead and get your veteran quarterback. Whether it's Minshew, whether it's Mariota, you're going to pay what you're going to pay. And by waiting a month or whatever, the pool's going to be, drained even more. So get your guy that you're really comfortable with, a Minshew or Mariota or whatever, as that short-term guy. Because, again, as we found out, if you wait, there's not going to be as much quality to bring in to help you get to what you want to do.
Yeah, and we'll see. Maybe they see a lot of these guys as pretty similar. They'll let the big contracts fly off the board, and then opportunities to start a few games are going to be limited for these quarterbacks as well. So maybe they'll get a guy for like 1 year, $5 million, instead of some of these deals. I think Heineke got $20 million over 2 years. So we'll see about that. The wide receivers coming off the board. Jacoby Myers was the first big one to sign. 3 years, $33 million with the Raiders. And then Juju Smith-Schuster ends up taking his place in New England on a very similar deal. Robert Woods is in Houston now. But as we mentioned, Adam Thielen's out there. Paris Campbell's still not signed at this time, so maybe there's a chance he comes back. I like the idea of bringing in McCole Hardman, just a guy with some speed, some run after the catch ability to add just a different flavor to that wide receiver group. So we'll see what happens there. I'm sure the Colts don't want to spend big money, but they'll add to that position. Some big deals for offensive tackles. I mean, a few of the guys we thought might be reasonably priced swing tackles are getting big money. Andre Dillard signed with the Titans, 3 years, nearly $30 million for a guy who was drafted in the first round but didn't end up being the Eagles' starter, was a backup there. Kelvin Beachum, I've been bringing his name up a few times leading up into this, thinking he's a guy who could be a nice swing tackle, reliable veteran, probably won't cost too much. Didn't cost too much. He stays with Arizona just 2 years, $5 million, but maybe he just felt comfortable there, wanted to stay home. Maybe the Colts think he's done and I'm an idiot. Who knows? The biggest money we've seen at tackle so far, Jawan Taylor leaves the Jaguars, goes to Kansas City, 4 years, $80 million, 60 of that guaranteed, as the Chiefs appear to be ready to move on from both their starting tackles from their Super Bowl teams. Orlando Brown is out there as a free agent, and their right tackle, Andrew Wiley, signed with Washington. A lot of movement. We talked about maybe Ryan Kelly being cut or traded by the Colts. Well, a couple of the top free agent centers are already gone. Ethan Pocic, I'm not sure how to say that, but he resigns with Cleveland, 3 years, $18 million, very reasonable deal there. Garrett Bradbury resigns with Minnesota, so a few of the options at center are off the board. Mike, do you think they're done at defensive end? I would imagine between the four they have, Lewis, their new signing, help me out here, Abukum? Yes, Abukum. And then obviously Dio and Kwity Paye as the assumed starters there. I wouldn't think they'd be adding too much, too much more at that position.
No, again, because you have to address the entire roster, and they have issues elsewhere as we've gone through. So, and obviously, once you get Abukum, Ngakoue isn't coming back. That's not going to happen. So, yeah, I think they've done what they wanted to do, and they've done it the way they've done it. I mean, if you want to see Abukum gets a contract similar to what Houston got, and of course Ngakoue wasn't a free agent; he was a trade. But and then they're going to bank on these young kids. They need Dio and Kwity to stay healthy, and Dio to really make that step in. And it's his third year, and boy, you just hope that Tyquan Lewis can stay healthy because he gives you so much versatility. So they lack that guy who's gonna, he's gonna get us 14 sacks every year, but they're gonna do it by committee, and you kind of like what they've got here.
Yeah, not a bad group. Defensive line looking to maybe be the strongest position on that defense as we head in, not knowing whether Shaq will be available. We haven't talked a ton about cornerbacks just because we didn't know if Gilmore would be back or not. But, looking at it now, Isaiah Rodgers, you can kind of pencil him in as a starter. And then I don't know who else. I assume
Dallas Flowers.
Dallas Flowers for now if they had to play today. I would assume they would bring in some veterans on bargain deals. I don't think they're going to spend big money on a quarterback. If they weren't willing to pay Gilmore $10 million this year, they're not going to turn around and then give that to somebody else, considering how well Gilmore played. So they're probably going to wait out cornerback a little bit and see who's remaining after teams have spent their money and get a few bargain deals just to get some, I don't want to say warm bodies, but just to get somebody out there. And then cornerback is a position down the road they're going to have to address. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to find long-term answers this year.
Well, you talked about Rock Ya-Sin. Is it possible he comes back? But it's not going to be the big contract guy. It's just not. It's kind of risky to do that. Does this impact Kenny Moore? I don't know because he's not really an outside guy. So, again, that's you pointed out that might be outside of quarterback the most glaring area that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, we've also talked about as Chris Ballard kind of remolds this team here, what makes sense to prioritize. I think you, me, and Dave all agree that it makes most sense to prioritize the offense. And so if you have to go for a few years where you just get below average to bad cornerback play, but that means you spend money fixing the offense and giving whatever young quarterback you have the best chance at success possible, so be it. I mean, whatever it takes to make sure the quarterback you bring in has all the tools he needs to be successful, I think is what you got to do. And so the Colts suddenly have a little bit more money at their disposal. We expect them to have more money soon. We are currently 7 minutes past 4 p.m. I just got a notification the Commanders signed Jacoby Brissett, former quarterback. I did not expect him to return to Indianapolis, but potential starter there in Washington, a guy who played really well for Cleveland last year. So that's another quarterback domino to fall. We'll, what do you think? Probably by this time next week when we're speaking again, I expect the Colts to have signed some quarterback to their roster.
Yeah, because again, I just think it doesn't serve a purpose to wait. Thinking, well, if we wait another 2 or 3 weeks, the price will go down. I just think that's not the best business practice. If you really like one of these guys, Minshew, Mariota, whatever, to kind of hold the fort next year until whatever rookie's ready, just go and do it, and don't penny pinch. Normally, the backup quarterback is a guy you hope doesn't play much. Well, the backup quarterback guy here will play in 2023.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, Matt Ryan, they did not need to cut him by the 4 p.m. deadline. His contract is actually March 17th is when he needs to be cut before that extra $17 million that they could save is fully guaranteed to Ryan. Mike, any chance at all the Colts decide to keep Ryan? I mean, I would put it below 1%.
Yeah, I agree. No, he's going to be gone. It makes no sense either from a roster standpoint, from a financial standpoint. He would be a great coach to have helping with a young quarterback, not at $35 million.
No. And after the year he had last year, I would say, maybe they can restructure a contract of some time. I don't think he wants to come back either. It probably benefits both parties to start fresh.
It just didn't work, which we've heard. That's 2 years in a row that it just didn't work, probably for different reasons. But no, the Matt Ryan era in Indianapolis lasted just about a year to the day.
Yeah, slightly longer than Kenny Gilmore. Or not Kenny Gilmore, Stephon Gilmore. I would put Kenny Moore's chances of being released pretty close to Matt Ryan's. I just think
it's another $8 million if you in money.
Another $8 million, and he really just did not fit Gus Bradley's scheme last year. So they're going to have to find at least 2 new starters at quarterback, and it's not like Isaiah Rodgers was a full-time starter last year. The rebuild is on in Indianapolis. Hopefully, a lot more of this will be official by the time we speak next week. Mike, as we wrap things up here, what are your overarching thoughts on the Colts' first few days of free agency, and what do you expect to see as we move forward into next week?
What they've done is what they normally do. They're trying to strengthen the entire roster, which includes from the bottom up with the Doolins and the EJ Speeds and on and on. But what they've got to do is they need to add impact players. Now, whether the defensive end is one, I don't know. I still like the kicker. I just like the kicker. He's got accuracy and leg strength. So, but they've got to come out of here with a backup quarterback that you can win with, and a right guard. The right guard cannot be on the roster. We've seen enough of that. Don't tell me that. Well, maybe if we leave Matt Pryor at right guard, it'll work. That's flawed expectations. So they're not done yet, but they've been relatively busy. But they need to add backup quarterback, right guard, receiver. Yeah, and a corner. So there's still a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. Nothing new from Chris Ballard here, and if he goes based off of last year, maybe some of the most impactful signings won't come for another month, 2 months, 3 months. I mean, Gilmore was a little late there. So some of these signings, the Colts really take their time on. So don't get caught up in the early free agent frenzy. They're going to work the bargains because this team is not, it's not one player away from contending for that Super Bowl. So they're going to make sure they do things that make sense for a team that's maybe thinking 2 to 3 years out. And I know that's frustrating to say. It feels like we were just saying that not too long ago, that Chris Ballard is not going to overpay early. And it's weird saying the same things about Chris Ballard as the Colts have kind of gone through their very short-lived era of being relevant and a playoff team back down to the bottom of the NFL, but that's where they find themselves, and maybe if they can land that quarterback, they can quickly ascend once again. But for right now, they've got to do things that make sense for the long haul and not just it doesn't help you to be 8-8 this year.
8 and 9. We got 17 games.
8 and 9, sure.
But one thing fans need to keep in mind, we all do, is whenever we talk cap space, it's really about cash, what you can pay, and all this. But they still are going to want to sign Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor to extensions. So that's got to be in the long term, not the long term, the short term budget as well. So a lot of irons in the fire, but they've got work to do. They've got some really good players on this team, but the holes are in places that they just have got to address with not just knock around players, but with players who can hold their own on Sunday.
Yeah, and I'm sure, the extension talks for Taylor and Pittman will pick up in the summertime. That's how they've done business recently, is they'll extend players in the summer. So not expecting to see that over the next few weeks, but that will definitely be in mind as they decide how much money to spend on everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will have much more news to discuss next week as free agency continues. Who knows? Maybe another big draft trade will happen between then and now. I hope Dave Griffiths is able to join us next week so I don't have to do as much talking. And for Mike, for myself, thank you for listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast.